And I think what we're seeing now and people are starting to realize more is there's not this big distinction between them, right? That there our physical health and what's going on with our hormones and our gut health and all the things affect our emotional health, our mental health, they affect then our relationships, right? And there's not this distinct connection anymore. They're all playing together, right? And then our stress level, right? And so our emotional health, and if our relationship is stressed, it can actually create more cortisol in our body, which is then creating these other health symptoms, right? And so they're really all related. So I love that the work you do, I feel like, gets at some of the root, right, causes that's going to have this effect on all these different areas of our life. So
Yeah,
I
for
think that's
sure.
great.
Sabra, where does your passion for this work come from?
Well, this is a long story, but initially, my passion for hormone support came from our own struggle with infertility when we first wanted to have kids, and just needing to understand my own hormones and what was happening and why I was struggling, why things weren't normal. And then we did go on to have 4 healthy boys. And, I didn't really worry about hormones as much for a while because I had babies. I didn't really need to. Things seemed pretty normal. And then late 30s, I started to be really annoyed with a lot of things he was doing.
Can you
And
believe it?
Chewing loudly because James
chewing
chews.
loudly, yes.
Breathing, yeah, there was a list.
Breathing, a
Breathing.
lot of things. And I was like, what is
Existing.
happening? Yeah, we are best friends. He's my favorite person. I would spend every waking minute with him. So I'm like, why is he getting on my nerves so easily all of a sudden? And I felt the disconnect, and I felt like it was beyond my control. And even though we were on trips, we were doing all of our normal things, it still felt like within me, it just wasn't the same. And so knowing what I knew about hormones, I said, I need to figure this out. There's something here that's off. So I ran my own labs and found that my own testosterone was super, super low and my hormones were off. There was a lot of things going on internally for me, and it all kind of made sense. It was like, oh, this isn't my fault. I'm not choosing this. We're not just drifting apart. It's actually something internal with me that was off. And so once I got that back, it was a game changer. We were good, everything was normal, there wasn't this disconnect and things feeling off. But I hear from so many women now, something just doesn't feel right. I can tell my libido's not there, and I love my husband, but what is happening? There's just something that has happened when I've hit, late 30s, early 40s, where things just seem different. And I think that educating myself and making sure that I was fully aware of what was happening to me also made me very passionate to make sure that other women understand that this isn't just a time in your life where you're like, I don't love my husband anymore. You do still love him, but physiologically something's off. And that's what makes you feel like that connection is not there. And they talk about, when perimenopause hits and menopause hits, that's when a big spike happens in divorces. And I think it really is related to the hormonal shift that happens more than anything, and our inability to handle the stress as easily as we used to because the hormones are all off. So we start to think that it's external factors when really it's internal factors that are affecting us and making us feel disconnected, even though we might still love the person. We start to have these different things happening with our hormones that we're not, a lot of people aren't aware that that's what's starting to happen.
Yeah. Couple things. I love that you have a personal journey within this that has then created the passion. I find that often people who have gone through it themselves and then go on to help others with it, they just have a deeper understanding for what their clients are going through, and then this added passion, right? Because they've been through it themselves. So I love that. That's part of your journey and why you got into this work. And also, I was going to say with the libido thing too, and perimenopause, and I've even seen it with couples happen right after they have a baby, right? And hormones are all over the place and breastfeeding. And what can happen sometimes too is then the partner, the male partner usually in this case, unless they're not understanding all the hormonal shifts, right? And so they take it personally as well. Well, they're not attracted to me anymore. I feel rejected. They don't want me anymore, right? So then they can go into their own spiral, right, around that. And then these two, people are in their own spirals that are just like feeding each other spirals, right? If that makes
Yeah.
sense. And it can really take the relationship in a negative way.
So yeah, on that note, Chad, as she was going through this process to get her hormones in check and be able to come back to her center, what were you doing to take care of yourself during that time to make sure that you could continue to show up solid and loving to her?
Well, it was kind of tough because, like Saber said, not knowing what was going on. I knew like we were still in love. She still loved me. That nothing had changed, but there was a change in that I noticed too, and we talk about it too. Or and you mentioned like we loved to go on trips. She loved to fly. There these weird things that would pop up like having a near panic attack in an airplane that was all hormonal. Like that was super weird. Like just the feelings of not feeling right and me not knowing what to do with that. Like I don't know how to support that, how to speak into that. Like, as a guy, I'm a fixer, right? And I didn't know how to fix any of that. So it was tough to sit back and watch. So, you try to be supportive, but you don't really know how. So I think that just adds to the spiral, like you talked about, that like she's going through something. I want to help her. I don't know how. So now you feel like you're just in this like rut and that you can't get out of, and it keeps going down.
I do think that I mean, I don't know if I did a good job, but I tried to communicate about what I was feeling and kind of
Yeah, you
some of the
did. Yeah.
details of
Yeah.
like what I was internally going through. So he understood like this feels off to me too, but it's not you. It's something within me. And I was not gonna just sit around and let people tell me like, oh, you're fine. I would go to a couple doctors and tell them like, hey, I think something's going on here. And they're like, well, all your labs are normal. And I'm like, this is not normal for me. Like, I don't understand why I feel this way. So until I was able to keep pushing and like get answers and get my body back in balance, it was just a constant like doing our best to communicate with each other how we were each feeling and making sure that I was just as open as I could be about what was happening in my mind and just in my body.
Yeah, and I think that was key. That she acknowledged it to me. It wasn't just something that was happening that was blown off, and we just tried to force our way through it. She acknowledged it. We talked about it. Yeah, and I think that was key. I didn't even know what perimenopause was until a couple of years ago. I never heard the term, so we didn't have those conversations. I'd still probably be in the dark.
Yeah. Did you pick up a couple extra shifts at work during that time?
No, that would have made things way worse.
Yeah, and I imagine, on that point about communicating, I would imagine the work you do, Sabra, helps give even women, we don't always know what's going on inside ourselves. Like you said, like, I don't know, his chewing is just really annoying all of a sudden.
I think she needs to work with you.
I also may or may not have almost had a panic attack on a hike yesterday.
yeah.
But anyway,
Oh,
I was relating to your airport story. Anyway, is that women oftentimes we just know, and I've heard people say this, I've heard doctors say this, that oftentimes the first sign of perimenopause is women saying, I just feel off, right? Like that's their first symptom. I don't know what it is. I just feel off. And that we don't always have an understanding or language to talk about what's going on. And I imagine in your work, it is also giving women language to then share with their partner. Well, here's what I found out on my labs. My testosterone was low, which is affecting my libido. So it's not you. It's not that I'm not attracted to you, all these things. And that giving that language to then help them communicate to their partner also goes a long way in helping to stabilize the situation, and decrease maybe some of the tension that their partner is also feeling around the changes they're experiencing. So question for you, how long, and this can be for your situation personally.
I'd actually be curious, like how long did it take you to right the ship, so to speak, from when you noticed that you weren't like something was off, and then how long does it take the average client of yours to do that same process?
Well, I think for me it was relatively short compared to what most people go through because I was already in the hormone space and really like understanding hormones a little bit. So I would say it was probably less than 6 months.
I would say probably sooner than that. Once you kind of
Yeah,
pinpointed
maybe
what you
even like
needed to work
3
on.
or 4. But most women can go almost a year or more. They go to several doctor's appointments. And I even just had clients within the last week. I had 3 women tell me I've been to several times to the doctor, and they tell me I'm too young to be in perimenopause and my hormones look fine. I'm like, let me see your labs. So when they come to me, it's a much shorter process because I'm already aware of what's happening and I know what they need, and we can get things moving faster. Usually, once we can address whatever the problem is, it can be less than 6 months to get women kind of back on track. But if they're kind of jumping around from doctor to doctor and they're being told you're normal, you're too young for perimenopause, like they could go years, and a lot of times they're just being offered anxiety medications or antidepressants, which is not truly treating the root cause. If you're given an anxiety medication or an antidepressant, it's actually going to make your libido worse. So your stress is going to come down, but your libido is not going to get any better, which I do often see. And then the longer you're on those medications, the harder it is to come off of them. So that can be a slippery slope. There's nothing wrong with those medications. There's nothing wrong with going on them if that is going to be life-saving for you and feel like that's really going to make a big difference. But it's not going to address the root cause, which is often a hormonal imbalance. So like I said, when they come to me, it can be a little bit quicker, but a lot of times women are, trying to get answers and just seeking everything that they can. And some doctors are just not educated in this area.
Do you work with a lot of entrepreneurial women who are trying to manage a business, figure out their relationship, and grow in a certain way, but also having these issues?
I don't know that I have a lot of entrepreneurial women. I have a lot of moms. I have a lot of working women, but not necessarily. I can't think of any specifically that are also entrepreneurs.
Kind of feels like that subset of woman might be hit a little bit harder
Yeah,
because if they're not feeling great here and then the marriage, like the domino effect. And
It's hard
so,
to show up in your business then if you're not
Mhm.
feeling, yeah.
yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. So it sounds like there's a ton of benefits to the work that you do, helping people feel like themselves and come back online. What do you think? And Chad, I'm also going to pose this to you, right? Actually start with you, Chad. Of all the benefits that you've experienced from Sabra's own personal journey and getting her hormones dialed in, as well as everything else, what's been the biggest benefit to your marriage?
I mean, as the guy, I think you started with me for a reason. The increase in libido is a big benefit, right? Often the men and the women are unmatched, and that's just how how the things normally are. So there's definitely an increase to our libido, and I think our sex life improved a lot. Everything is good or better when your sex life is better, I guess. Like it's all tied together, not to dance around the question, but when your sex life is good, it trickles over to every other part of your life and vice versa. When we can bond emotionally, it translates into every other part of our life as well. So everything works together. So when everything is on track, emotions and libido and being able to have that time together, when it all is working together well and in unison, it really just benefits the marriage overall.
I think that's what James was hoping you would say.
I figured.
I'll send you that
You started
five
with me for a reason.